As we've seen with the recent disruptions, customs and global logistics are often treated as fixed constraints, areas where a lot of supply chain leaders feel they have little control. But today's guest believes a little bit of those assumptions need to be challenged. I'm pleased to be joined by Mike Bunge, Vice President of Global Supply Chain and Operations at Hamilton Beach Brands. Mike brings a practitioner's perspective on supply chain transformation, inventory optimization, and global trade. Mike is very passionate about customs and logistics and the reality that many strategies available to improve outcomes if organizations are only willing to rethink how they approach the problem. We'll talk about the challenges that leaders face, the strategies that have worked, and how tools like the SCOR-based maturity assessments can help organizations move from it is what it is to informed, intentional decision making. Mike, welcome to the chain.
Hi, Abe. Yeah, thank you for that. Happy to be here and pleased to be in front of the audience.
That's quite a challenge that we have today. So let's set the stage. Across a lot of the industries, as I indicated before, a lot of supply chain professionals feel like they're constrained by forces outside their control, especially in areas like customs and global logistics. Why do you think that mentality, it is what it is, mindset persists? And what are the barriers to meaningful improvement?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question, and it's one that you hear frequently from supply chain professionals. It's also one I'm passionate about. Probably the easiest answer is like, if not us, then who? Right? Who's going to take this on? There's a whole subject area here that most of us don't learn in school. Things, you really got to piece together different areas. And who really owns it? Does legal own it? Does finance own it? In my mind, supply chain really owns it because we've got a better view of what's going on in our own individual networks. It's a complete discipline in and of itself. And I think if you look at maybe traditional supply chains, ones that are more structured around practice, meaning I have warehousing, I have distribution, they're functional, right? They're functionally aligned. Trade, compliance, tariff, mitigation, tariff risk levers, those really tend to fall in between different functional aligned supply chains. But if we look at our supply chains in terms of value streams, in terms of product flow, information flow, cash flow, then we start seeing that this discipline of really tariff management, duty management, it really is best owned by supply chain.
Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, these are the individuals that take on challenges and get it done. But let's dig in a little bit more. More often than not, we feel like this is being thrust upon us, whether the tariffs or regulations or trade policy. Where do organizations typically underestimate their influence in terms of being able to respond or shape the regulations or the policy?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think a lot in supply chain, we view it as it's an external political type of a thing. And it's really not, although it's political, it's a big part of it. And a lot of it is not directly controllable, but we can control our supply chains and we can certainly influence the political side too. And I'll tell you, I look at it really under 5 different umbrellas, and we could go really, really deep into each of these 5 umbrellas. I won't do that for time's sake, but things that we own, right, is our supply network. And what is the optimal supply network? We own inventory, we own capacity. How do we make sure our inventory is flexible, our capacity's flexible? We own trade management to some extent, right? And I'm talking about things there. Your legal team could say, well, they own trade management, but there's a whole supply chain side of this that involves things like foreign trade zones. It involves things like preferential trade agreements. We thought under this administration there would be no such thing as a preferential trade agreement, but then we've got AGOA, the African Growth Opportunity Act, getting renewed. We've got Haiti, things like first sale rules, things like tariff engineering. That kind of all falls under what I call trade management. We also have supply risk management that involves things like factory ownership, forced labor, all of those compliance types of things that needs to take place within our supply chain. And then we've got collaboration, and collaboration has a lot of different elements to it, but it's data sharing, sharing data with not just our suppliers, but also our customers, using our customers' data to run through our systems, share to our suppliers. I also include under collaboration things like government relations from the perspective of supply chain. And we're hearing more and more people in supply chain are realizing that government relations is part of our role. And you know, we've got some really, really smart people in government, but they also need some input from industry to better understand how we're going to react to different policy changes and how industry and government can act together to really accomplish both of our objectives. There's also, you know, like risk sharing and a whole host of topics under collaboration. But I kind of frame up those 5 areas to give us a better sense of really how supply chain has a lot of levers that we can pull that help us, I won't say mitigate exposure, but really help build more flexibility and help build more resilience into our supply chains.
Critical, especially today with all the disruptions that are going on. Mike, dig down a little bit deeper for me on the 5. From your experience, which ones are the ones that cause the most concern for you today? Is it inventory? Is it service? Is it cost? Where is it that you feel like we're challenged most today to respond?
Yeah, maybe all of the above. And actually, because there's so much change and so much rapid change, it's extremely difficult to manage supply chains in an environment with such rapid change. But what we found and what you find is when you develop those 5 levers, you're pulling different levers at different times, depending on how policy changes. And, you know, I talked about like the government relations side, that as governments looking for input to different policy changes, we can communicate. Here's how we're going to respond. I would say probably our biggest challenge right now is just the ability to react to such rapid change, to have that resilience built into our supply chain, so we're ready to respond when something goes sideways. You know, we last year, using as an example, when we had tariff rates from, I want to say it was China, up to about 125%. And you watch what happened to imports into the US out of China, and they tanked. And a lot of people really just turned off that as a supply node into their network. And we're working very, very hard to ramp up other nodes of supply.
Interesting that again, the challenges are almost equal, and again, they tend to increase or decrease depending on the specific, whether geopolitical or the other types of disruptions. Let's go to the other side in terms of where we're seeing the greatest benefit. You said there's a number of strategies that organizations can help navigate the customs and logistics. From a macro level, what categories of strategies tend to have the biggest impact in terms of improvement or responding to?
As we talk to Republican leaders, we also talk to Democrat leaders. There's actually a common force that aligns both parties, and that is their approach to trade, and depending on what it's being called in the government, right? A foreign entity of concern, an adversary, those types of nations. There's a common approach to trade between both Republicans and Democrats. And we've heard people from both sides of the table talk about, a common adversary brings both parties together. And we've heard that in multiple cases. So I think I'm not sure I would view that as a positive, but I would view that as an indicator of what's coming and what more there is to come.
It's interesting you point that out, Mike, that some of the changes or some of the actions that we're taking are in response to either current government or change in policy. Is this structural now, or is this episodic? Do you think that this is something that we've now got to pay attention to from this point forward, or are you seeing an end to the types of disruptions that we're facing today?
So on the trade side of things, I don't think it's episodic. This
Yeah.
is becoming more structural, and it's actually, with the Supreme Court ruling on IEPA,
Mhm.
the alternatives that we have as a country now, that the United States has as a country, those alternatives become even more structural because things like 301 tariffs and 232 tariffs have a process that's required that takes more time, that requires input, from studies, different studies that are going to be done by USTR, and public input and public testimony. And there's an entire process that takes place there. So they do become more structural and less episodic. And, if we go back to the previous administration, there really were no 301s that were removed from 2019. And if anything, some of those 301 exemptions were allowed to expire in the last administration. So I think we're looking towards more structural change here.
It's interesting, Mike. Oftentimes we've seen inventory buffers and, building up to respond or to mitigate some of the decisions, sort of a shock absorber to some of the decisions that are being made. Obviously, our finance team members are raising the red flag in terms of how much cost that we're burying into the inventory. But yet, how do you respond to, solving the logistics problems without the inventory shock buffers that we have here? Because obviously the CFO is going to push for, lean operations and just in time and, efficiencies and cost and speed, whereas our supply chain folks are looking at redundancy, resiliency, and agility, multiple vendors or multiple locations. How do you balance those two?
Yeah, so I'm in an extremely fortunate position in that I have a CEO or CFO and CEO for that matter, that we're able to work very, very closely together. We're able to talk openly and honestly. Some organizations may have silos. We don't have silos. We're able to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and just share open communication about what's in front of us. And we all, we balance each other. So the CFO definitely, has input into these decisions. If I go back probably 10 to 15 years, just in time was a big, big topic. And you recall that, as we studied Japanese manufacturing and the Toyota manufacturing system and lean thinking and this wasn't too many years ago. And just in time, we found that is has not. You can go back to the pandemic and actually prior to the pandemic with some of the tariff changes that took place in 2019. That just in time has its limits, and there's an argument to be made relative to having safety stock in your network at the appropriate place. Now, I'm saying at the appropriate place because there's still a lot of recall. I mentioned, information sharing and focus really on the value chain. If we're sharing information, we can go back and let's take a look at some of our longest lead time components. Let's share information on demand from our customers through our organizations back to our supply points and really focusing on those long lead time components, making sure that we've managed that risk and we do hold the appropriate levels of safety stock at the appropriate points in our supply network.
A really interesting point that you're making, Mike, in terms of the diagnostic and understanding the problem before you jump to conclusions or jump to solutions. Oftentimes we see that, knee-jerk reactions to a number, whether it be the tariffs or, logistics issues, get me a new provider, get me a new system, more safety stock. Why is the diagnostic so much more critical for you as you're describing it in terms of getting the input from the CFO or your chief sustainability officer or your CEO in terms of what the objective is, for the organization, especially in complex areas like global trade?
Yeah. So, there's a tool out there that I really do like when you kind of, you reach a point and you go, oh no, now what do I do? It's like, what's the next step? We call it DMAIC: define, measure, analyze, improve, control. And I actually just recently used AI to actually prepare a DMAIC outline for me, and that it was extremely useful. had a meeting and we were just brainstorming some of the issues in front of us, transcribed that meeting and ran it through AI and said, prepare a summary level DMAIC for me on what we just discussed. And it was actually amazing how effective the AI translation was into a DMAIC type, process flow. And it's a great tool to use in that regards.
Let's dig into some of the tools because Hamilton Beach just went through a SCOR assessment, and so I'm going to dig into that a little bit more. How did you evaluate the SCOR assessment? Why did you move down that path? Obviously, for example, you use the supply chain maturity assessment, which looked across all your core processes and helps an organization understand, what is a symptom versus a root cause in your customs, logistics, and your inventory. Why the SCOR model for you?
Yeah, I was super fortunate when I got hired into the organization. My CEO said, I want to understand, where we're doing things right and where we have room for improvement. What's a way we can do that? And it was an amazing opportunity to say, there's this SCOR assessment tool that has level 1, level 2, level 3 metrics, and we can actually go through and do some benchmarking there. We can do a maturity assessment. And I had support from the top of the organization, which actually was a phenomenal place to be in. And as you go through the SCOR assessment, you really set some priorities because you can't be good at everything, right? You can't. And in project management, we learn about the triple constraints of scope and time and money. And actually in supply chain, it goes far beyond that. It's not just a triple constraint in many areas of supply chain. So in SCOR, we learn about things like reliability, responsiveness, agility, cost, asset management, efficiency, and we can go deeper and deeper and deeper into each of those metrics. Surprisingly, we're here talking about trade, and we're talking about different levers we can pull within supply chain. When we went through a SCOR assessment, it told us we need to remove some cost from our trade network, from the way we approach trade. And initially, when we looked at it, there was a subset of people that said, yeah, can't be done, can't control it, can't influence it. And actually that SCOR assessment, Abe, is what drove us to go deeper and drive a deeper level of understanding and pull in some friends from legal and pull in some friends from compliance and really come up with a game plan on how we're going to approach this. So that whole thing started with the SCOR assessment.
I love the comprehensive nature of it, specifically in bringing in the other teams where a lot of the collaboration and improvement occurs across the enterprise, as opposed to, as you indicated before, Mike, within the silo of a department here. Once organizations see their gaps, how do you help organizations, specifically leaders, where to focus first? Because oftentimes it's all these gaps are identified. Where do you think you can start so it doesn't overwhelm the organization with the gaps that are identified? How do you do it pragmatically?
Yeah, that's a good question, because actually where you called out the fact that we involved other functions. We put finance and IT, some two leaders from finance and IT, we put them in charge of our SCOR assessment. So it wasn't supply chain grading supply chain. It was actually people from outside, and we participated under the leadership of IT and finance, which was extremely helpful. It actually helped break down some of those silos, some of those barriers. We were all in this together. And surprisingly, when we came out of those assessments, it told us where we needed to focus, but then it was like, where do you start? How do where do you dig in first? And interestingly, with my team, I had an opportunity to say, we really need to move from functional alignment, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, to value stream alignment. But I couldn't envision it. I'm like, I don't see how our current structure could align with value streams. And I had somebody on my team that stepped forward with about 6 or 7 different types of org charts and walked me through it and said, here's some of the pros and cons from each of these. And I was so impressed with that process for a couple reasons. somebody else took ownership, right? They stepped forward
Yeah.
and they said, look at this, I've got some ideas. And I've even matured my ideas to the point that I've got some org charts to share with you, boss. And let's see if we can make some of this work. I was so impressed. So we did move through, and we've broken up into some. It's not functional. It's value streams. So we've got a value stream of plan to product. We've got a value stream of order to cash, and we focus on everything that takes place in that flow. We focus on product flow. We focus on cash flow, and we're focusing on information flow.
Mike, you're bringing up some really key points there, and I don't want to lose them, specifically in the cross-functional alignment. Oftentimes, we hear the silos are getting in the way of the process improvements. From your perspective at Hamilton Beach, how critical is leadership in terms of the governance and in terms of the implementation of the ownership of the outcomes?
Yeah, it's huge. And the whole, how to create a culture where we have shared ownership in the outcome. And so the leadership, we can help paint a vision, but we often can't dictate that, and drive that down into tactical bullet points. But if we help set this vision, and we pull in our teams, and we get our teams to help set the strategy, and then we can drive it into actual tactics that we all have ownership in then. And it's not just, like I mentioned in the SCOR mark assessment or the SCOR assessment, we went cross-functional, and we were reporting into finance and IT. And then as part of the solution, we've got finance and IT support in that solution. Very, very important. And it's corporate culture is something that's extremely difficult to develop and mature. And once you have it, though, you want to hang on to it, right? You know this at ASCM, right? How many years? The best place to work for
9 years in a row.
Yep. 9 years in a row. So you know what I'm talking about on culture, and you get that corporate culture in place, and it's something you don't want to change, and it's something to be very, very proud of.
And you've seen some significant improvements. Give me a sense of, some of the data points that came out of this. I mean, this was no small, impact to the organization.
After going through the SCOR assessment, Hamilton Beach generated 88.6 million from operating activities, which was the highest level in the company's history. Company used cash to reduce debt by 31%, returning capital to shareholders, and also internally funding the acquisition of a medical appliance company. It was an all-cash acquisition company called Health Beacon, and the company's share price jumped from $9.21 to $25.24 in less than a year. And of course, partially attributable to the SCOR assessment that we conducted. And this Hamilton Beach is a public company, so you can see these exact figures in the Hamilton Beach annual report, CEO letter to the stockholders. Big impact, and it still is. It's still we're still maturing, and it's something that the eyes for continuous improvement, and how I view the problem as an opportunity, and how we talked about the DMAIC tool, how we peel it back and get to root cause. There's a lot of opportunity still in front of us.
Mike, take it down or up to the leader level for supply chain leaders who are listening and feel often trapped by the global complexity. What's your advice to them in taking the first step in terms of, what can they do today? What can they do tomorrow in areas like customs and global logistics that oftentimes they feel like it's out of their control?
Yeah, so if supply chain, and you hear this quite a bit, supply chain leaders, hey, there's nothing I can do about it. It's external, it's political. I would encourage those people that have that feeling or belief to learn with the curiosity of a child, to really dig in and don't take no for an answer. Let's figure this thing out. Let's go, first of all, partner with your legal team. What can I be doing on the trade side of things? I mentioned, early on, as I was talking about kind of those 5 areas, things like first sale rule, tariff engineering, foreign trade zones, preferential trade agreements, those types of things. Learn about as much as you can there. And there's some really good legal teams out there that have like webinars and have educational type offerings that are very, very focused on this area. Again, it's not something we generally get out of school. It's not something You could go through and you could take the custom broker exam, which is extremely hard, extremely difficult exam to pass, but you still don't get all of what you need for this, all of these duty and tariff risk levers, all of this global trade risk resilience we're trying to build into our network. So I encourage a leader that thinks, gosh, I don't have much control over it, I can't do anything. Dig in and learn about all the different options that are available to you. I would also say then go through a SCOR assessment. Take a look at your organization. How mature am I in each of the different SCOR areas? What do I need to focus on? What do I need to work on? Combine the two together. It worked out very, very well for us. I think it could work out very, very well for others.
Mike, beyond the metrics and all the key, improvement areas, what are some of the soft benefits that you saw out of this in terms of the relationships within the organizations and how to work and address the challenges? Because God knows we've got enough crisis today. This isn't a function of looking for problems. We've got enough. What are the benefits of going through this for your team?
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit is the whole cross-functional visibility. It's also respecting our teammates in other areas, respecting their input, respecting their knowledge, and building our own knowledge and building our companies, the curiosity, the drive for continuous improvement. It really did a lot to knock down silos. And it also helped me because we did it when I came into the organization. I was fairly new in the organization. We went through the process, and what better way to learn about your organization from the inside out than to go through a benchmarking process. Phenomenal way to gain better and deeper level understanding for your organization.
Mike, I can't thank you enough. Obviously, these are topics that I'm going to revisit with you as we move on in the coming weeks and months. Again, that is all the time that we have today. Mike, again, thanks for providing insight into some of the challenges Hamilton Beach is facing and how you're progressing and moving forward.
Thanks, Dave.